Today we're speaking with Manar Harb, who is coming to us from Occupied Palestine, and it is an absolute thrill to be speaking with her today. In one of the most beautifully written artist bios, Manar Harb is a writer and artist. The space between drawing, handwriting, painting, and sculpting insinuates her and the ways these creative modes of expression inform literacy. Growing up in occupied Palestine, she learned Arabic and English simultaneously and was exposed to multiple languages like French, German, Hebrew, and Japanese on a daily basis. Manar uses her native Arabic to communicate ideas about language and visual culture and their relation to our body and the physical world. Manar, thank you so much for joining us. I understand
Thank
that
you,
you're
Roula.
right now in occupied Palestine. Is that right?
I'm sorry,
I understand that
nighttime?
you're in occupied Palestine right now. Is that right?
Yes,
Yes.
yes, I am.
In there.
I'm in the city of Ramallah,
Wow.
and it is nighttime here.
Have you been there most of the last year, or is this a recent trip for you? Or
Yeah, actually, it was a quick visit, and just mainly I wanted to see my parents and my family. So I've been here for about 3 weeks now, and I have 3 more weeks to go.
oh, it sounds just wonderful in spite of the fact that there's a global pandemic still raging and that people are still sick, and none of that has really changed all that much. But I imagine that seeing family has been the just absolute best, a gift.
Yes, yes, it has been. And actually, this trip was delayed a year because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I haven't been back here for a long time. So it's quite amazing and very special to be here. And it sounds strange, but I was speaking with one of my friends the other day, and they're like, "Oh, so how are you? Like,
Yeah.
how are you finding it here?" And I'm like, "It's actually been soothing, but it's a bizarre idea." But just being with family, even under these extreme circumstances, definitely is relaxing and
Yeah, that
it's
makes a
great.
huge difference. And your
Yeah.
sister's there as well, is that right?
Yes. Yeah. I have one of my sisters here and two of my brothers. So it's really awesome to be around all of them.
All right, we'll make the most of the available internet and not keep you up too late. Thank you so much for zooming in when it's very late in Ramallah.
It's not that late, actually. It's 9 o'clock, 9 p.m.
So you are part of the Swana community here in the Bay Area when you are
Mhm.
when you're in this part of the world. What what brought you to the Bay Area in the first place, and how did you start to connect with Swana members in the wider community?
Mm. So my travels to the US has always been around education, and I completed my undergraduates in the US, and that was my first encounter with Oakland and the Bay Area. But I ended up moving, and I moved to the East Coast, and I ended up getting my college degree in Florida, actually. But when it came to my master's, I was really determined to have a very special experience, and I thought the Bay Area would be the best place for me because even though I only spent a few months, I spent like a semester here during my undergrad. I immediately felt a sense of community, and it's kind of a mysterious feeling actually, but it felt special, and I thought that would be a better place for me to come back to the US.
Yeah.
And the moment I landed in Oakland the second time, it was the end of 2011, actually, like December. I remember I spent the New Year's there, and then boom, we were in 2012, and I was just, on that whole process of applying to colleges and degrees and so on.
Yeah.
So there was something special about the community that attracted me, and I immediately connected with it the moment I landed again.
Wow. So did it go, was it through uh, introductions through friends, or was it something that you sought out yourself? Like, because there seemed to be in the interviews that we've conducted with artists so far,
Mm-hmm.
there seemed to be just these charming interactions that people have, like you meet someone at dinner, or you have a conversation with someone at an opening, or you walk into someone's shop, or something that just gives rise to these conversations, and those conversations build into, other interactions. And then before you know it, you're part of this beautiful, creative, sprawling diaspora community. And so did it sort of proceed along those lines for you? Was it along those lines, or did it take another sort of path into that?
Yeah, it was actually, I mean, it's kind of a long story, but the very first time I moved to the US, I was actually still in high school, and things were really, it was the second intifada in Palestine, the second Palestinian uprising. And my father, he had a fellowship at the University of Madison.
Oh yeah.
So under these extreme circumstances, my parents thought it was a better idea to travel with him.
Yeah.
And so I went to Madison with him, and I finished my high school there. And my last year of high school, so yeah, so that's how actually the connection originated. And then when I came back, I've already had that experience at Mills, and I had a couple of friends that I was still in touch with, and that also prompted for me to come back here.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we are just so fortunate that you are, a part of this community, and that you share your beautiful multidimensional practice with us, just sort of across the board. And
thank you.
So it's one of the most beautifully written, not surprising from a writer. I'm wondering if you can sort of start to get into like the major themes or influences in your work, and how they manifest sort of across the painting, your language, like across that, in your creative practice. So so just what are those creative influences or inspirations for you?
Thank you. There are several. I mean, like my bio says, I was surrounded a lot by different languages, and I felt like there was not enough actually interpretations on languages. And particularly within the education system, I came across a lot of mental blocks to questions I had. And one of them in particular has to do with the teachings of the Quran and religion in general in the education system. It's very problematic.
Yes.
And I'm a very curious person, and I think most children are, if not all of them.
Yeah.
But I was always curious about the meaning of letters in the certain surahs or chapters in the Quran. They begin with those letters, and we were always told like, oh, this is like part of the miracle of the Quran. And there are different explanations and interpretations for them, but they're not satisfying. I feel like they're limiting, and when you ask, the answer is like, well, like there's a limit to how far you can go with your question, and then it's like forbidden. And that didn't make sense to me. And it was just fascination, and I don't see anything wrong with that. So this never like departed me. It stayed with me. And then it was kind of an obsession that I got, where I started drawing. It started with the letter Nun, and I just started obsessively drawing it and doing different sketches, just using that shape. And I see like different drawings and shapes coming out of just from that repetition process. And that like stirred my curiosity more, and I like dug deeper. And then I found myself actually like experiencing it as a bodily experience. And that's when I saw that there's this performative aspect of it that's really important. And then I started also teaching Arabic in the US, and that also made me have a deeper insight into the language. And having to pay attention to the pronunciation and break the language down,
Yeah.
it really put things more in perspective for me. And I started linking the shape of the letter in the Arabic language to the way that it's pronounced, because it's about, like flexing your muscles in a certain way to pronounce certain sounds.
Yeah.
So things started tying together, and I just like started digging deeper into it, and I'm still on it. I'm still actually reading about this, and in the process of like writing something a little bit more comprehensive and just breaking it down in a way that's easy also for people to understand. But that's how it started. It's just like a questioning,
Yeah.
and it's just evolved and evolved. And I feel like language is a very fluid thing.
Yeah.
And and it's just like always changing and developing. We can always add to it. So I love it.
The way you describe getting into the physical and the psychological space of repetition and writing, and sort of where that repetitive act sort of gives way to a wider mental creative space, which is that's really powerful. Is that so? As a painter, does that sense of performativity, does it translate into that medium as well, as opposed to like having a pen or pencil in your hand and writing on a piece of paper or something? Does that translate as a painter, and does that, in your painterly mind, is that part of that whole process?
I feel like they are related and interconnected.
Yeah.
And they inform each other.
Yeah.
It's a very, I feel like it's a wide conversation when we're talking about painting.
Yeah.
And sometimes, for example, I would create a painting not really thinking, but I can still see that part of language, appearing within the painting.
Yeah.
And sometimes I am actually painting more consciously, but I'm still really surprised by the outcome. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question.
You do. It's definitely there.
Okay.
I guess I'm not I'm a writer like you, and a lot of what I do is freehand on paper before I ever sit down to get something to the computer. And there is that sort of meditative space, but what I can't speak to is, as I'm not a painter, and so I as a writer, it's like understanding somewhat of that meditative space that you get into in the actual, like the handwriting, that I can absolutely relate to. But there's this one sort of question mark about what does that mean in a painter's mind. So yeah, you absolutely addressed the question. It was just it like you, I'm hopelessly curious about these things. Like getting into a space that I personally don't inhabit, but hearing about how someone who does is fascinating. So
yeah, and I'm really interested in the idea of the subconscious mind in a way, and just what that says. I think I find myself in a place of great privilege to be able to have that space to paint and explore, and like really dive into my artistic and creative practice. But we are not in a world where that is available for a lot of people. And I think that's a really sad reality, because I mean, I don't know how it was, 5,000 years ago or whatever. Yeah, I can only imagine, right? But when we look at crafts, and like we study anthropology and we go back in time, I think there's a very, very fine line actually between a comprehensive written statement and just like an innocent sketch that can still be beautiful and informative and can tell you a lot about the psychology and the space and even the geography of the person where they are coming from. So that is also a very interesting idea that I'm very curious about, and I like to just not just explore, but make it more visible, like breaking that barrier between, you know, what makes a painter. Like, it's not about, you know, what you study or like what you like. It's at this point, and for many, many hundreds, if not thousands of years, it's just a matter of, you know, who has that privilege to paint, you know. But it's like this idea of being, you know, literal, someone who knows to read and write, and illiteracy. I don't think, you know, in today's standards, I would agree, like this makes, you know, the college degree makes you a literate person, you know. You know, someone who doesn't read and write can still read and write in some sense, in some language, in the painterly language, you know, for example. So I want to break that ice, and that's part of, I think, what I'm trying to do with this exploration of letters and painting and combining those different forms together.
It's so beautiful the way you describe it. And something you said just a few minutes ago, like an innocent sketch, was like, that is just, I mean, not shocking in that it comes from you, but just so in the moment, just shockingly poetic. So it was just, my writer's head is just like, wow, where did you come up with that? That's so good. So thank you for that. So part of what motivates Zamin Project is talking about Swana community, and sort of it pivots around this question of resources and how we cultivate and sustain our own resources. And so when I say that word, what do you think of in relation to community, or however you interpret it? Like, what does the word resources mean to you?
I mean, I have to say, when I read the project, I was like, yes, like we need this so much, because it's much harder, I feel like, for a Swana person to enter the US in particular. I mean, you know, I cannot speak actually to any other place because this is where I have lived. So we don't actually have resources. It's so much harder to gather around a sense of community, especially within the art world. So this is amazing and so great that tying those individuals and communities together, you know, I think that is a very resourceful, you know, resource all in its own. Just people, you know, we help each other so much, and that's like beautiful, like, yes. And then apart from that, it's also, you know, like our spaces, right? I definitely see that there's a lot more you know, like minority groups, you know, working really hard and competing even with the most, you know, resourceful institutions that work in arts and culture. And we're, you know, creating our own spaces and building more bridges between each other and other groups. So that's exactly what we need. And that's what I think about. Like, we need each other, we need to create space, and we need to tell our stories, like, you know, on our terms. because we're constantly being edited and censored and all of that, you know. And I mean, we're up against like a huge media propaganda war that is attacking from each direction. So but I definitely see a lot of, like, we've come a long way and it's paying off. And I am so grateful for Zamin. It's like, it's great. And it makes me feel more connected,
Good.
even, yeah.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. I'm so glad to hear that. And everything you mentioned, just the motivation for the project itself, and all of the conversations that it's uh, activated, and just the connection that it enables, and just hearing people's you know a variety of responses to this particular question. But it
Mm,
really does, and not surprisingly, really does pivot around that community connection, and that there is,
mm,
and where these conversations happen, and what they lead to, and just the ever present, like ever giving cycle of conversations, of interactions, collaborations, creative and otherwise. It's something marvelous to watch, and to be part of. And I think
mhm,
this project, is literally just the beginning of it. So thank
mm.
you for participating in this first.
Oh, thank you. I'm so grateful. This is amazing.
All right, so the last question, and this has been consistently just really interesting. What are you thinking about right now? Like, what's top of mind for you?
Oh, this is such a tough question to answer. But definitely, taking up space in my mind is
Yeah,
how I can serve my community here in Palestine
yeah,
while I'm in the US, and
yeah,
vice versa. How I can, you know, create that balance, that work where I am really, connecting um, Palestine and the Bay Area or the US,
yeah.
um, in a more concrete way. And I think there are ways, but it's like definitely actively thinking about those ways.
That's yeah. I would imagine that with family and culture, like all the ties that happily link you
Hmm.
to occupied Palestine, to that region of the international Swana community.
Hmm.
I imagine, of course, that's top of mind, especially now with everything that's happening in Gaza and Jerusalem, and just
Hmm.
all over occupied Palestine.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that these are things you're thinking about, and I hope in the next, I think you said 3 weeks. I hope the time
Hmm.
there is more than anything just fun, and family oriented, and safe, because who knows who knows what could happen in Ramallah.
Yeah, it's
But,
so true, right? I'm like, hopefully I don't get
uh,
stuck or
thank you so much for this conversation, and I hope the rest of your time
Mm,
there is just fantastic in every,
thank you.
and we'll see you.
I'm so grateful to speak with you, and you're such an eloquent speaker, and I'm looking forward to also connecting with you in person when I get back.
Yeah, when you get back, let me know, and we'll go get some food or something, but just spend time in each other's presence again. And I absolutely
Yes,
look forward to that.
thank you.